And hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Hospitality Digital Marketing, the live show number 99. There's songs written about that number. 99, ooh, or party like a 1999. Anyway, do you know what am I singing? But we are at the magical, mythical 99 mark. 100 will be our next episode in July. And we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary, just a couple of short weeks thereafter. So thank you all for participating in our what now is a 2-year venture of weekly live video broadcasting live stream. For those of you who are with us on Facebook Live and on Periscope Live and on YouTube Live, we thank you for your joining us. As I type in a couple of text leads on this, we will be joined hopefully by our special co-host soon, which is Mr. Robert or Mr. Jonathan. So Robert Cole is one of our regular hosts. Typing and talking at the same time always a challenge, right? But Mr. Jonathan Stone is with News Cred. He will do, but Mr. Stuart Butler is first out of the gate and joining us. Hospitality. Can't even spell. Mr. Stuart, sir.
Hey, what's up, Lauren?
You beat everybody to the punch today. I'm still typing titles on Periscope Live, and boom, here you are. Thank you for joining.
It was that late night flight in from Charlotte. I got in at 2 a.m., so sleep deprived, but raring to go for the show.
Well, thank you very much, and also thank you for making it through all the travel. How was HITEC and Rock?
I did not make it to Rock because.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I was trying. Okay, so yeah, I got Robert a ticket, but they said no to you. They don't like you near as much as Robert. I didn't want to tell you that openly.
Something about the way I smelled. I'm not sure, but no, HITEC itself was good. They're claiming record numbers this year. I felt like it was a little light on the show floor, so I don't know if it was just that everyone was going to the other stuff. A lot of the revenue managers left on the Wednesday, but so Thursday was a ghost town. But that's typically vendor day anyway for that show. But but it was good. I felt like the quality was there, and we did a lot more pregame this year at Fuel, and that paid off big time. So a lot of people came looking for us versus us having to grab people out of the aisle. So.
You've made it like in New York when people at HITEC seek you out rather than you seeking them, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So it was good. Yeah, I think it was.
Did you do some live broadcasting? I never knew. I didn't.
We did on the first day. We did some live Periscope, just walking the show floor, and I've been told to give a few people some motion sickness. It was like the Blair Witch Project. But I was scheduled to do some on Wednesday. I'd already met with a bunch of vendors, and I had it planned out who I was going to do. But then and I'm sure Robert will give you a different version of this story. But Tuesday night, we were out at the Navis and Stand Touch party, and I'm pretty sure Robert pushed me. Pretty sure Robert pushed me, but let's just say there was some stumbling involved. There were ankle.
There were a
broken metatarsals.
There must have been 24 defenseless kittens, and there was this gang, the notorious Toronto kitten kickers. Right, there must have been 20 of the guys.
That's right,
and you have no idea.
Is that actually a club name, the Kitten Kickers? Is that it, or is that a band?
I saved many lives.
Stuart's Jiu-Jitsu. You would not. The guy. Oh my God! Yeah. You haven't seen stuff. It was like the Matrix. He was just like up in the air and spinning. And I don't know. One of the guys had a tire iron and direct hit on his. And I don't know. I think it's a bruise. Probably.
Yeah. It was not good. But needless to say, I spent most of the day on Wednesday at medical facilities and icing it, and so it was not the best. But I'm still blaming Robert. He was right behind me when it happened. In my mind, I rolled like a ninja, but all the witnesses they claim it was very far from looking.
You thought there was only 4, but there was a 5th that was hidden. Is that what it was?
Yeah, that's pretty much.
If Stuart had been drunk, there might have been a reason for him to fall. It was pretty pathetic, actually.
Yeah, no, there's a public warning here to everyone: do not look at your phone while you're walking downstairs.
No.
You've heard. Do not text and drive. Do not text and walk.
Yeah.
But I think we've come up with a new band name for Tim if he was joining us. That he needs to bring Stuart and the Kickers on.
Right. That's funny. But anyway, long story short, I did not take my protective gear to HITEC, and as we know, that advertising is now a contact sport. So that was my mistake. But I didn't get to do the live videos. But we are going to cover a lot of the vendors we talked to on the podcast, so we're recording that this afternoon.
Oh,
so,
excellent!
So yeah, we'll kind of give a rundown of our favorites, picks of show, things like that.
Not to try to toot our own horns, because you do quite a lot of broadcasting, quite a lot of podcasting, but there is a lot of behind the scenes fasty. It isn't just for the faint of heart to try to keep everything juggled when you're broadcasting and trying to keep context and so forth. So I can completely appreciate I'm in a huge auditorium with X thousands of people trying to do what I'm here for, plus trying to do broadcasting, which isn't what exactly you're there for.
Yeah. It's kind of lower on the totem pole. It's fun though; it's the most fun part. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to do it. But sorry to all the vendors out there that we didn't get to do the video. But hopefully they understand. So, and we'll cover it on the podcast.
Hey, pardon my tardiness. How are you?
Listen, when you go to play on the circuit, because we know you're a world famous musician, we have a new band for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's coming out of Toronto. It's a mesh between Myrtle Beach style and Toronto flavor. It's called Stuart and the Kitten Kickers.
Wow. Well, that's I clearly walked in late on something there. and I want you to know that there's no need for me to be a world famous musician. Now that I have this show,
That's right.
Although you guys may not know this, I actually spent 10 years in the music industry and had such smashing success that today I do digital marketing for hotels.
Well,
no. The story I twist.
I thought it was Tammy and the groupies just were not. She put her foot down, and
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought Tammy didn't want that life anymore, and he made you leave an amazing career to settle into this comfort zone of yours.
So it's really funny. I actually have a friend. We are way digressing. I have a friend who works for the college that I went to, who's an ex-music industry guy who teaches people how to get into the music industry and how to make a living in the music industry. And I always want to tell him,
how many people is that?
Well, and I always want to tell him, I'm like, with all due respect to the guy, because I love the guy, he's a very dear friend. And I know a lot of things in the industry are circumstantial, but it's a classic, if you can't do, teach kind of. It's it was a hell of a way to almost make a living for a decade.
Yeah, my nephew is a very, very good guitar player. And lives in Sun Valley, Idaho, and he was with Old Death Whisper for a while, and really changed what they were doing, and it was great. Playing a lot of slide guitar and things like that. And now he's kind of sometimes playing with this other guy who, maybe going somewhere or not. He's recorded in Nashville. He's recording in LA, but he's running a pizza parlor. And he's doing a great job and he's making good money at running the pizza parlor sort of thing. And he's good, but the music thing, the guy's really accomplished. And,
so here's the thing, and I'm going to watch this. I'm going to turn this into a hospitality marketing thing.
I'm glad you were.
I was going to do that too.
So what's fascinating is because of things like YouTube, because of things like SoundCloud, because of things like iTunes, etc. The bar has been lowered in terms of what it takes to put yourself out there and connect with customers, right? To connect with your audience or connect with guests, right?
Yeah.
The flip side is the bar has been lowered for everybody. So competition is actually tougher now because it's easier for everybody to do it, which means it's not always easy to make a living at things like that, right? So the same is true. I have people say this to me all the time with regard to hotels of, well, shouldn't this be easier? Didn't Google make this easier? Didn't, things like that make it easier? And it's like, yeah, it made it easier for everybody. Now you have to compete more effectively.
Yeah.
So, there are an immense number of parallels between what's happened in the music industry and what's happened in the hotel industry. The beauty of the hospitality industry is you get paid for every room you sell. If I'm playing a show as a musician, I get paid for the one show, and it's tough to monetize that multiple times a night. in a hotel, I can monetize every single room I have every single night. So anyway, nonetheless, I'm sure there are
Mr. Tim, what is a meniscus?
I beg your pardon?
A meniscus.
It's a ligament in your knee.
Yeah.
That's why it sounded so familiar. I just got an email from our esteemed, who should have been our co-host, Jonathan. They tore his meniscus. It isn't joining us today.
Oh my God! Well, that's painful from everything I've ever heard.
Maybe he went to HITEC too. Maybe there was.
Was he the person you were fighting with at HITEC?
Yeah. Stuart kicked him in the meniscus. That was.
So Stuart, did you get into a scuffle in Toronto?
Yeah, it had to be 40. I was wrong before. It had to be 40 guys he was fighting. Unbelievable. Those Toronto street gangs. Good Lord. I mean, they're brutal.
Yeah.
Well, I do
my shin guards. I forgot them.
Well, if Jonathan for any reason is listening to us in pain, sorry about your meniscus. I hope you feel better. But we'll just talk about you while you're not here. Then
that's right.
So news cred.
No, do feel better though.
Yes, you feel better. You feel better. Meniscus is. I have knee problems, so I empathize with knee problems.
And you bend your knee a lot. Yes, you tend to bend your knee.
You don't notice how much you use
often.
it until it hurts. Yeah,
they're pretty important. Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to shelve the news cred conversation to potentially another date.
Well, we'll just have to talk about the music industry.
We'll have to keep on with kitty cats. Actually, since two of you did go to HITEC, and Robert, I did tell Stuart that HSMA likes you better than him, and they wouldn't give him a ticket, but they'd give you a ticket. So please just keep making him feel that he was an unwilling participant in rock. That's all.
Listen, you know in the film industry, there's 6 degrees of separation. I feel like there's 2 degrees of separation with Robert in the hotel industry. Like there was not a single person I was talking to. And the other thing I learned at HITEC is that Robert is a total stalker, because every single time I was talking to a vendor or someone there, right around the corner would come Robert, and he'd come bouncing up, and I thought he was coming to see me every time, and nope, he was seeing the other person I was talking to. So he knows literally everyone.
Do you know what Robert does? You know those little track dot things you can get now?
Yeah.
So what he does is he walks up and he targets the field as to who he wants to talk to, and then he bumps into them, and then he always knows where they are.
That's great. That's great. So what happened at HITEC? What'd you see at HITEC?
Actually, one thing that was interesting, John Ing produced a thing for Hospitality Upgrade, which was the history of hospitality technology. And it's like a little 45-page book, which they didn't put in anything. It was just sitting on their thing. A very interesting read of lots of, glory and and the horrible things that have happened to technologies in the industry. But yeah, you kind of look at the industry and go, wow, that didn't happen fast. But there were some really interesting gaps too, which not to rail on. I mean, it was a big effort that they put together, but Anasazi not really covered, which is pretty amazing.
Wow. How do you not talk about seriously?
Right. Because of, they built this. There was some mention of Cisco and some, they covered Confirm quite a bit, which was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a big disaster of a major $125 million failure of a major system that never was stillborn.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a gap in
that's
in
a big that's a big miss.
They really didn't cover the GDSs doing hotel technologies, either, and kind of those platforms, which I don't know. They covered certainly a lot of the PMS. That was really.
Did they talk about Travelocity?
Not really. No, not that much. I haven't read it completely. I was kind of going through on the plane. I didn't finish it, but just little things. But again, it was hospitality, technology. They got to a variety of other.
But Anasazi is a big miss. I mean, they were such a huge company and exist today in a survivor form. For those of you who are watching who don't know this, Anasazi bought Pegasus, right? So Anasazi owned Fisco,
they created.
They were the hosting company for Fisco for a long time.
Developed all the underlying technology.
Right. They built Fisco. They bought Pegasus, and then they took the Pegasus name.
Right.
And then, of course, Disco, which exists today, is a spin-off from Pegasus. So I mean, and Anasazi built The CRS that was used by a number of companies still is used by at least a couple. Wyndham is in the process of transferring away from what was the essentially on a SASE CRS that was the
they bought a license.
CRS.
They bought a license for it. Yep, and then
they
developed off on their own.
They owned the source. Right. Best Western, I think, did the same.
Yep. Hilton was on it for a long time.
Hilton was on it for a long time. Yeah, they were a huge technology company. And again, still exist essentially as Pegasus and Disco.
And talk about key innovations and people who were looking forward. The guys who founded that, I mean, Tom Castleberry. And then the classic were the two Rays, right?
Yeah.
Were really the two Ray. There are two guys named Ray who were kind of the technology, or the John. Oh God, what was the guy's name? With a beard. This guy was like a tornado chaser, lived out in the desert, but just brilliant. They came up with my understanding was they came up with the technology for like the first American Express card swipers. Yeah. Sort of thing. That was their first.
They were owned by American Express for a while. They were owned by First Data Corporation.
Right. Yep. Yeah. They had sold to First Data and then they wound up buying it back.
Castleberry bought them back.
But in 1989, these two guys, Ray and John, I can't remember what his name was, figured that TCP/IP was this is kind of new. That could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they were in way early. And I remember going to it wasn't really HITEC. It was some sort of tech show or something. And they would do demos and everything was, they provided the first stateless system, right? Because you'd be doing something and they would unplug the cable and everybody go, don't do that. Because if you did that with a GDI, anything, it stopped and you had to relog in and start and get back and then plug it back and you were right where you were. And people were like, what evil magic are you doing?
Well, I gotta tell one quick story and then we should probably move on from like historical recollections, just to talk about other things too.
That's right.
But Stuart, in particular, I think you'll find this interesting. You have a development background, right? You've written code and things like that, right? Okay. Yep. So we ran, when I was at Wyndham in the early 2000s, we ran on what was called Netbooker 0.9, right? We bought a license for the thing and then we just developed on top of it. But what they had done was all of our area lookups, all of our web-based searches on the back end. To connect to the CRS, you had to connect via something called a TIP, which was a proprietary interface, right? And it was, what was it? EDSI, something like that. I can't remember what it was called, but an old form of
Edifact.
Edifact. That's the kind of thing that airline systems used and things like that. Old way of transferring data.
Lots of credit card process still is done by Edifact. Yeah. All the stuff underline the bottom of Sabre, underline, a lot of these systems is still Edifact for communication between systems.
Right. So what we would do was we would send a HTTP GET request to a Perl script that sat on a Windows box that would instantiate a Java virtual machine. That would then transmit. We would send XML back in the HTTP GET, HTTP post rather. Excuse me. It would then the reason you needed the Perl script was because at the time Microsoft and Sun Microsystems were locked in deathly combat, and you could not run Java natively on Windows. Right. So you had to have a Perl script be the thing that would instantiate the Java virtual machine to then convert the XML to Edifact to connect to the TIP, to get the area search, bring back the rates, turn it back into HTML, and then display it on the front end. And it did all of this across a T3 line between our data centers in Long Island and Pegasus in Phoenix. Pegasus in Phoenix. It did all of this in about a second.
That's cool.
So I mean, the engineering on the software was brilliant. even though the architecture was a freaking nightmare.
and the best thing in that era were the Java memory leaks. So you got to spend a lot of time with the Sun guys going, what the hell is going on?
Actually, that never was a problem for us, though, because we instantiated a new virtual environment every single request, right? We were doing what, 15,000 reservations a day at about a 7% conversion rate. So you can do the math in terms of how many requests that were per day. And this was all, in a second, really fast. We did find some weird things. We had to fix some of the code, and there was something in the Java code on the Anasazi side that said, really kludgy hack must be patched ASAP. And it was dated, in the code. And it was dated 1995. Like this was Java. This had been written in like Java 1 or something. It
wasn't even Java. It was just Java.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. These guys were remarkable developers. Their architecture sometimes was a little bit of baling wire and chewing gum because they were usually on the very bleeding edge.
Yeah, the best thing at Dreamy Draw Drive, which was their headquarters, they used to bring people in for tours, and you had their data center, and kind of on the left side was all the stuff like the NetBooker and Sierra stuff, but on the right side, that was the cool one. That was basically Cisco, and so you had all these comm racks that were flashing colors and looked really cool and really
it looked like the end of War Games.
Exactly. Yeah.
I bet
while the Whopper was working really hard. That's
so it's going. So
I bet Stuart could go over and test to the fact that there's been plenty of times where really good code was ruined by being shoved in with a bunch of crap code. So,
but anyway, they would lead groups of people through this. And the security was, they had like a little locked door with little key things, so which was glass, right? It was just like one layer with a little. Yeah.
So I want.
Oh no! Hang on! No! I just want to go one little security thing. So
come on, you're going way down a tab rabbit hole that doesn't matter.
Oh no! This is the stability of the entire hotel industry. So they had all the major chains. Somebody on a tour tripped over a power cord, and Cisco went down. There was no communication for any of the 50 hotel chains dropped. I mean, we're talking online, everything gone because somebody tripped over a power cord on a tour.
It wasn't me, I promise. I have a reputation for stumbling, but it was not me.
No, not power cords.
Yeah. So since both of you were HITEC, you were probably not yet born. This was a long time ago. and Robert, so just so we're all clear, is very, very old.
Yeah,
so,
very old.
So Lauren, you had a question.
I want to know about HITEC since I didn't go for the first time in 14 years. Mm-hmm. And each HITEC has its own flavor. Like, what was the predominant technology that was on display? Who really cashed in on the big booths that were trying to push something where they didn't before? I mean, we've gone through all these iterations of TV systems and software systems and everything else. What were some of the impressions you had of the floor as to what was the real lead points? Who really stood out? Was there something new and innovative that you guys caught? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. This year's flavor was vanilla.
I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah,
it was a little disappointing.
Vanilla light
last year.
There wasn't any major innovation. Like I went there really expecting to see a lot more on the AI side because it's everywhere right now, right? And things like voice control, it was there, but it really wasn't as advanced as I was hoping it would be. And then nothing on 360, augmented reality, VR, like nothing.
Really?
It was crazy. Yeah. And I was expecting to see some big pushes.
I'm seeing some really cool. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I was surprised that I wasn't surprised. There was nothing that I was like, man, that is some cool shit. And I usually get that at HITEC.
The big booths were, the TV guys, the in-room, stuff, that sort of thing. Certainly, the Wi-Fi stuff, routers, all that sort of thing.
A lot of security companies this year too. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of security, malware, things like that,
actually,
which is good. That's good.
Not innovative per se, but crushingly important these days.
Yeah, it's not
foundational.
Yeah,
foundational. And then
Well,
Yeah, I mean, most of the other ones, I mean, it was actually very interesting. Well, and there's also some issues in terms of just the booths. Anyone who appeals to revenue management, because HSMAI had the Revenue Optimization Conference on Wednesday, which was it was normally the peak day for HITEC traditionally. Because that happens, Rock is now drawing over 600 people. And a lot of chief revenue officers and things like that, digital marketing people, stuff like that. That kind of sucks that group out of the room, so that isn't great. And all of those, they have their own little. I mean, it's not really booths; it's just like a little, a stand-up table where you can just talk to people. So, but these guys would have to have two displays. So you would see a group like Rainmaker, who had had something up there. They had a little 10x10 booth over in a really bad look. No, at HITEC in the corner, way back.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
Sabre had a 10x20. Now Sabre, I don't think was at Rock, but again, horrifically bad location back in a far corner of the hall where Sabre used to have one of these large
right when we walked in.
So and I don't know the total square footage of the booths and the booth counts and things like that. It didn't seem as big to me.
How was floor traffic? Because to me, floor traffic at HITEC is something of a leading indicator of what's going on in the business, right?
It was lighter this year.
It was lighter this year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I would say I was there Thursday and Tuesday, and I mean Wednesday I didn't go near it because again it was all in the Metro Toronto Convention Center, but HITEC was in the south wing and Rock was in the north, and that's a pretty good distance the way this thing is laid out. You aren't those two paths. It's a 10-minute hike between them, sort of thing. So I don't think those paths cross. And because Rock does some things, they were doing some Tuesday pre-Rock things. They had some seminars and things like that, which I think was Hebs, Norone, and somebody else did like 3 of those. They had other sorts of events, that were done then. And on Thursday they have the Chief Revenue Officer Council. So again, those guys are kind of pulled out of it. So that kind of pulls the wind out of all these sort of innovative areas where you'd think that's what are we going to do? Not just pure revenue management. What are we going to do to kind of add to the top line? It kind of shifts HITEC to be a little bit more hardware-y oriented and in-room stuff. The one thing that surprised me, surprising number of groups still selling telephones and clock radios.
Right.
You'd think, wow, and they'd have a display of all. So we've got 20 different clock radios, and you're like, gee, okay.
I'm just vaguely curious about this, by the way. This is a little. It's not super off topic, but it's a little off topic and probably snarkier than I ought to be. But I always found whenever I got to HITEC, I always got cornered by some desperate sales guy trying to talk to me about door lock systems.
Yeah.
Was there anybody there selling door locks that weren't Wi-Fi, that weren't a keyless remote at this point? Or did you guys just avoid them like the plague?
I didn't see him.
Okay, fair enough.
Traditional locks.
Was there any surprising participants? Like when Microsoft dropped in that one year where people were like, what the heck? And then
Microsoft were there again.
Were they there again?
Yeah.
And the best quote I heard, there were 2 guys, I don't know who they were with, and it was on a far local, and you just kind of overhear these little conversations and things like that. This guy rushed up, he goes, Microsoft came by the booth. They're like, really? What did they say? I mean, you could just tell they were there with
Microsoft.
Selling, and you get so much.
Well, I'll tell you what, Microsoft
to the guys who are there or trying to get acquired or whatever that case might be, or partnering type thing. So you have that other sort of the other dimensions of the trade show there. But yes, they were quite excited that Microsoft had visited their booth.
Well, I'll tell you what, Microsoft has had a really good week. Nobody knows why. You guys know why.
On that
Go ahead, Stuart. Wait, Stuart.
No, go ahead. I'm guessing.
I want your opinion.
I actually have to drop off for a few minutes because there's a fellow I've been trying to pin down for literally 2 weeks who is now available.
All right.
So I will be back.
Oh, fantastic. So, Stuart, I actually want your opinion on this. Lauren, I want your opinion on this. But I think Microsoft has had a fantastic week because of what the EU did.
That was going to be my guess.
Yeah, well, that's in our little docket of happiness today.
Yeah,
that wasn't just a slap down. That was a bend you over. That was.
But why do you say that, Lauren? I agree, but maybe not for the reason that you think.
You talking about for the benefit of Microsoft or the detriment of Google? Because to me, it's
for the detriment of Google.
I think the door has to crack a little open on process and methodology for Google now for it to balance out its claim that it is not in an antitrust, that it's not skewing data. It's going to have to reveal more of itself.
I don't think they're going to have to reveal much. I think that there's a much bigger issue here. But I would love to hear Stuart's point of view.
Well, you know what? Yeah, I listened to your podcast last night when you talked about it. So I'd rather hear it straight from the horse's mouth because I think you nailed a lot of the insight related to the impact that it's going to have.
I was having a conversation with somebody this morning, and I've actually they twigged me to something I missed in the podcast too. And I'm, so the people should not be too hung up on the money, right? I talked about this on the podcast.
They have so much cash.
So much cash. It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be fair. It's a lot of money, but it's not material in any meaningful way to Google.
It doesn't add to their stock valuation.
Right. What I think is really incredibly bad about this for Google is that they're basically defining what search is now. And the thing that I didn't talk about on the podcast that came up in this conversation this morning is they've basically what the EU has done is they've made a clear distinction in their minds anyway between horizontal search and vertical search, right? And they're saying Google is horizontal search, and thus they can only do certain things. And if they use that search to influence vertical markets, then they're illegally using their monopoly power against other players in those vertical markets. That's enormous, because that's not just this situation with, shopping comparison, but Expedia had a very good day because of this, right? Booking.com had a very good day because of this. Yelp had a very good day because of this.
TripAdvisor too, I'd say as well.
Yeah. They're basically saying that, much beyond 10 blue links, you start to get into some areas where they could be anti-competitive. And that's hugely detrimental for Google. And hugely beneficial for, the Expedias of the world, the Booking.coms of the world, the TripAdvisors of the world, as relates to our industry.
I agree. I think to me, it could, and this is just Europe, right? I don't see this kind of ruling coming to the U.S. I feel like the philosophy of capitalism is completely different. And,
that's right.
But in Europe, this is a pivotal moment for search. And I don't think people really get that, because if you look at what Google's been doing, trying to go universal search for so long, and it's all about generating revenue from as many different places as they can, whether that's flights or hotels or shopping or advertising, whatever it is, then they may not be able to do that anymore.
That's right.
Things like bringing in answers to questions from other people's sites, like Wikipedia, stuff like that could be under threat.
That's more anti-competitive to me, because that's one where they're actually taking someone else's content and displaying it on their page, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're leveraging owned content from someone else for their own benefit and monetizing it. That's where they should be going.
Very cool insight, Tim. I didn't think of it in the horizontal and vertical, and that's a very cool insight.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where I'm just looking up something right at the moment. Sorry. This is bad for them, because it's basically the EU is saying what search can be. And that's hugely, hugely impactful to Google.
Yep.
I had what I'm looking up is the number, because I can never remember the number. So Alphabet is the parent company now. Everybody knows that, right? But what people don't recognize is Q1 of this year, Alphabet made $24.75 billion in revenue, right? We'll round it up. We'll call it $25 billion, right? 87% of all of Alphabet's revenues came from Google's advertising sales,
Mm-hmm.
$21.4 billion. So they monetize all of those results very, very well and very impressively.
Mm-hmm.
And Stuart, you're exactly right. They've been trying to make universal search the thing. And by making this vertical horizontal distinction in the way, what they basically said in their ruling was that there's this idea of they defined the market as general internet search. And they said that Google has a dominant position in general internet search and is then using that illegally to, create to crush competition in other spaces. And if you look back at the Microsoft Netscape case from the 90s, right, the Microsoft Department of Justice case, I think everybody knew for the most part back in the 90s that there was a distinction between the operating system and the software that ran on top of the operating system, right? Opening up a browser, you're opening up a different program. Right. And Microsoft, at least according to the DOJ, illegally used its monopoly power to crush Netscape, crush a different software service altogether. In this case, they're saying internet search is one thing, horizontal search is one thing, and vertical search is something else entirely. And I don't know that that's right.
Yeah,
I struggle with that one.
Yeah, I agree. I think this honestly hurts consumers. I mean, assuming that Google's good, right, and isn't going to use this power for evil, which is why monopoly commissions exist. But this is going to reduce the utility of search engines. I mean, it's fundamentally going to be a inferior experience moving forward because they're not going to be able to leverage the knowledge they have on us to serve us what we want and what we need. And that to me is the limit. From a hotel perspective, and I'm sitting here with hotels that are ranking exactly the same organic position they were this time last year, but their organic traffic is down 20, 30, 40% because now you've got so many paid listings above you, whether that's the local pack with GHA, whether that's an extra paid ad because they moved the right rail.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting how they delineate. How do you get so specific that you can define that, a shopping listing is not part of natural search or part of the key core search, but yet GHA is? How do you define that? So does this mean potentially GHA can no longer be served in the organic listings? You
can certainly extrapolate from this ruling to go there easily. Yes. And I think this is bad for hotels. So we always talk about monopoly, right? There is a flip side of a monopoly that most people don't talk about, which is a monopsony, right? So a monopsony is when there's one buyer for all of the things that you sell. Okay. So there are people who argue that Amazon is a monopsony in books, right? That they're so dominant that they're the only place that if you sell books, they're the only game in town, and thus they have anti-competitive, the possibility to create anti-competitive because it's not a stable market because there's not competition from the buyer side, right? In the hotel industry, I'm going to coin a term. This is a terrible term, but we have a duopsony. We have Priceline and we have Expedia, right? We are sellers of hotels. We are sellers of travel, etc. There's a lot of power, as we've all talked about, from this we always say duopoly, but if you want to be really technical about it, they're a duopsony of Priceline and Expedia. And I think, I'm sure you've been doing this when you look at hotel price ads and when we look at things like Facebook dynamic ads for travel and the like. To me, those are really interesting opportunities to put competitive pressures on that duopsony to actually sell product more widely. And so I think this is bad for hotels in the longer run if this does in fact have impacts on things like hotel price ads and all. So yeah, I'm not at all sure that the EU got this one right. Yeah,
I would agree. It may not stand, right? There's going to be appeals.
There's going to be appeals. So first off, I think we always need to say these things, right? I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, any of that kind of crap.
But he does play one on this show.
Well, I will tell you, this gets into areas that I've always found very interesting. But I'm not. I make no claim to be an attorney by any stretch. From things I've read, and I've read a fair bit about this over the course of the week. Usually, the EU's courts of the various courts of appeals you go to for these things, do side with the Commission a lot. I don't remember the percentages, but it's a non-trivial number, because the way the EU is structured. We have somebody who's from Europe on the thing, and I'm the one talking about this story. You could probably speak to this far better than I could, far better than I could. But my sense is, the way the EU's charter is structured, this is what they're designed to do. So the courts are kind of like, that's the way the charter says, so we kind of leave it to them. Am I interpreting that correctly? Is that fair?
No, I think that there's definitely an advantage to the EU in terms of the way the system's set up to maintain and not get bogged down in years of litigation and appeals like this country sees, right? So It's definitely a different structure. But, I think there's so much ambiguity in this specific ruling.
Right.
There's a lot that is not clearly defined. Like we've already touched on some of that I think there's a chance we're going to see the ruling evolve a little bit and maybe loosen a little bit, but it'll take time. But Google's got deep pockets, and like you said, 85% plus of their revenue is coming from this specific place, So I think they're very heavily incentivized to make sure.
They have no choice. Yeah. They have no choice because this is existential for them.
There's a great stat I saw today that between Google and Facebook, their ad revenues are larger than any the combination of all newspapers, all radio networks, and I don't think they haven't beaten television, but that's about it. Right. Everything else in the world in those areas, it's just unbelievable.
Well, we did pass television advertisements, and in gross total, not just Google, but in gross total for digital spend now is in excess of anything spent for TV now.
Right.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
Right. But the stat that Robert's pointing out is Google and Facebook combined make more than all the newspapers, magazines, and radio
together in the world.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. In the world.
So extend this ruling to Facebook now. Right? Think about
exactly.
This has to Facebook. I mean, it's huge. How can you not argue that them getting in? I mean, it's not just advertising, but product placements, things like that in the Facebook network is not essentially the same thing. Are they going to delineate between the social network in shopping? Because if they do, Facebook's direction is going to have to pivot.
And Amazon as well, even though maybe Amazon says we're a retailer and we aren't search advertise, but it's product search. So does Google just go, oh, here's now Google product search in its own bucket where you aren't looking for, I don't know. Yeah.
And then think about
general search terms.
Go to voice search, Does this limit Alexa's utility in the future? Are they going to prevent you from doing some of these things with
the one difference, and this is one where I am going to play lawyer for 1 second, right? But the thing
I knew he couldn't resist.
For some reason, this topic has always fascinated me, right? Has always fascinated me. I spent way too much time reading way too much about the Microsoft trial back in the 90s and each subsequent one that's come up, because I think they're so critical to the way digital works, right? Digital is somewhat different. And, you have to prove 3 things, right? First, you have to prove that there is a market and the market is separate. A lot of these antitrust things, get thrown out right on the outset because they're saying there isn't a distinct market. Right now, in Amazon's case, certainly retail is a market. I think most people can, that's pretty prima facie, as they say in legal terms, right? On the face of it, you can all see that. The second is that you have monopoly power, or monopsony power, as the case may be. Mm-hmm. And the third, and this is the part that the EU said in their ruling yesterday, is being a monopoly is not in and of itself illegal. Right? Mm-hmm. Google is a monopoly because it's a natural monopoly. It's just the best product. So it has become the dominant player because it's better than everything else. Right? What's illegal is when you use that power to illegally harm others in either the same space or in other spaces, right? So, you know, Apple got in trouble a couple of years ago when the book publishers and Apple partnered to basically set prices for books. And basically they said, yes, there is a market for selling books. Yes, these guys do have a monopoly because the publishers were the only ones you could get the books from, and they were colluding to act as one with Apple.
Right.
And they were then using that to cause harm to others by fixing the price that people had to pay for the books everywhere, thus hurting Amazon, as the case may be, which was funny because Amazon was the victim in this one, right?
Right. Yeah.
So in the case of some of these,
and to note there,
Amazon,
they fought against it because Amazon was lowering prices for consumers. So they were doing something good for consumers that then Apple and the publishers fought against, right?
Right.
So that was the damage.
But what you have to prove, I mean, in Facebook's case and in Google's case, I think we can definitely say there is a market for sure, right? There's a market for search for search. There's a market for social, and that yes, they're a monopoly. It becomes a question of, are they then acting in a way that is illegally using that monopoly to harm competition or consumers? Because that's usually the way the EU looks at it versus the way the US looks at it. Very, very roughly, generally. And this is something I have talked to a lawyer about because I was like, do I understand this correctly? And he said, yeah, more or less, that's right. There's always nuance, but essentially in the EU, their take on it is if you're hurting competition, ultimately it's going to hurt consumers. So they always try to fix the competition side. In the US, it's if you're hurting consumers, we assume that's because you have monopoly power and are using it illegally to hurt competition. But essentially that's the easy way to keep them distinct. You know, when we talk about somebody like Amazon, you know, yes, there is a market. Proving that they're a monopoly is tougher depending on the vertical, and then you have to prove that they act illegally. So I think Google and Facebook are one thing right now. Amazon's a little different for now. You know, maybe that'll change, but it's easy to extrapolate this past what it is. And what it is already is massive in and of itself.
Right. And it is complicated though, because you've got the interests of the consumers who want easy access to buy products. And you know, I don't know what percentage, you could probably find it, I'm sure Google of people searching for packaged goods, that sort of thing, start with a general search. Although I now understand that Amazon is actually has a higher ratio of product oriented searches than Google.
It does.
Yeah.
Actually,
so people start their product searches now, or particularly Prime members, right? Which at least in the US is more than half of the household.
This is a big factor though, right?
Yeah.
Because over the years, if you think about search as a behavior, Google has actually lost share from a behavior standpoint.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people who will open up an app. They'll open up Expedia. They'll open up TripAdvisor. They'll open up Indeed if they're looking for a job. They'll open up Yelp if they're looking for a restaurant. They'll open up Amazon if they're looking for a product as an app without going to search at all.
Yeah, or their voice, right, with Siri.
Or voice with Siri, or voice with Alexa, right? So, sorry, Alexa. Go away. So, you know,
Alexa,
which by the way,
Alexa, buy me smart guy.
That's why I'm wearing headphones, buddy. But that was always Microsoft's defense in the Department of Justice trial, and I'm sure it'll be Google's defense in this one as they fight this, and they have to fight it. Like, this is far from over.
Yeah.
But their defense has always been, and I think Google has a better argument on this one. Their defense has always been, you know, two guys in a garage could come away tomorrow and just kill us like that by inventing something better. Like, the market shifts so quickly, you can't regulate it the same way. Right. Where I think Google has an even better argument is switching costs. Right? If I was a Windows user in the 90s and I wanted to switch to using a Mac, or I wanted to switch to using, you know, whatever else was out there in those days, God only knows what the third biggest operating system was then. You know, the switching cost was massive. especially if I was like a corporation or something like that, and I had 5,000 desktops I had to transfer and train and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The switching costs from Google are zero. I just type in Bing.com. I just talk to my Echo. So the concept of lock-in in a monopoly context is very, very different than it was. And the thing I want to point out is I'm going to actually just put a link up right now. This is from Skift this week. I was trying to find it in the wild, but I can't pull it up on booking.com. But they're showing how Booking is now putting hotels, flights, cars, restaurants. Kayak was on there, which is something I've been predicting for a long time, that Meta and search are just the same thing, really. And, these guys can do this. This is something that comes up in this stuff all the time because they're not a monopoly. If you're not a monopoly, you can do anything you want. It's only illegal if you're a monopoly to do this kind of stuff, right? And so we're seeing, like I say, I think this is a huge win for Booking. I think this is a huge win for Expedia if this stands, because it allows them to chip away at Google's margin by introducing more features like meta search right within the search results, by selling other products. And I think that's massive. And they're not held to the same standard by definition because they're not a monopoly.
Agreed. So think about this. So let's assume that this stands, right? Assume that Europe goes off in a different direction.
Yep.
US, South America too, stays in the situation it is. And I don't know what implications it's going to have on the Asia side of things too. But we could be in a situation where marketing strategy, marketing tactics fundamentally are different in Europe than they are in the rest of the world. And there's already some nuances, right? But this completely changes the game.
That's right.
What you do and what works in the US will not work the same way in Europe anymore if this stands.
That's absolutely.
It's going to kind of cause a splinter in expertise and approach, which we've never seen before.
No, that's absolutely right. And that's theoretically possible. I did mention this on the podcast yesterday, but Google pulled Google News out of Spain last year when 2015, when in 2014 Spain passed a new copyright law that basically Google News violated, right. By their law. The funny thing about that was there was a study that just came out. I think I talked about this in the podcast. It was in my notes. I just don't remember if I actually got to this point in the time I allow for the episode. But where Ars Technica cited a study that found that's been horrible for Spanish publishers. So as hotel marketers, anybody who's looking at this and goes, good, about time Google gets something, a bloody nose like they deserve. I don't know, man. Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. I agree. But like you said, and what started this conversation is Microsoft may be the biggest beneficiaries.
Oh, right?
Because it's not inconceivable to see a consumer shift. Like you said, the switch cost is zero. If I'm a savvy consumer and Bing has the utility that Google has now, and they are doing products inserted in my search as contextual purchasing, why wouldn't I be incentivized at that point to switch to Bing? So we could see a massive, unprecedented shift in market share of search engines in Europe that, would fundamentally shift the balance in Microsoft's favor. So
that's absolutely possible. And coming back to this idea of what I showed with Booking.com, they by definition wouldn't be held to the same standard because they're not a monopoly. So they could do all the things that Google is disallowed from doing, disallowed if the ruling stands.
Right. So it could be really interesting, right? Bing could take over a huge market share, get 50% of the market share, and then you could argue, well, Google's no longer a monopoly in that jurisdiction. So then they can get right back in the game. So you could have this kind of seesaw effect going on.
The other thing I do want to point out is I also think there's an interesting effect. I'm not sure of this. This is a hypothesis I've had for a long time. Somebody's probably researched this and found out if it's true, but I've had a theory for a while. And my theory is Microsoft screwed up massively when it came to mobile, right? Microsoft missed the boat on mobile in a big, big, big way. And I think there's two causes to that. This is just my sense. And I think this has had massive implications for Microsoft. You know, for anybody who wasn't alive in the 90s, who wasn't alive in the sense of, you know, dealing with technology, dealing with computers, dealing with all this stuff in business, it's impossible to overstate how big Microsoft was at the time, right? However big Google is today with the web, Microsoft was every bit as big with computers, period, right? And this is my hypothesis, that they missed mobile in part for two reasons. One of them was that they'd been successful with Internet Explorer, whether legally or illegally is besides the case, that, you know, it's the innovator's dilemma. They stuck with the thing they knew and missed the next thing, right? And the second was they spent the last part of the 20th century and the first part of the 21st century fighting this massive, massive trial and looking over their shoulder for what regulators would let them do and not let them do.
Yeah.
And so they were very distracted, right?
Yeah, and cautious, right?
And cautious.
It curbed innovation, for sure.
Okay. For sure. Just hear me out for one more second. So I think that this could have broader implications for Google, even if they fight this thing and win. But these things don't get won easily. The IBM antitrust suit was a 13-year lawsuit.
Right.
The Microsoft one was like 6 or 7 years. It can really force people to take their eye off the ball. Yeah. And I think this could be very damaging to Google, even if they win at missing what the next thing is. Right.
Their red tape just got a lot thicker.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for
sure.
They
have to run a lot more through their lawyers than they ever.
I don't disagree with you. I think it's a very realistic premise to this, but maybe it's because it's fresh in my mind because I'm writing a piece for somebody that's paying me to write a piece. I kind of went retrospect on how we get to where we are kind of stuff in our industry for our dysfunctionalities when it comes to marketing, digital, and so forth. So I get to pull out the old history book of myself going through and living the transitions that we're talking about.
Yeah,
and to one point, I want to say that with Google, I think there's a whole nother potential. I had kind of like a utopian moment thought for a second that maybe what we're looking at is the transition into a world that's not about paying for position, but paying for the recognition that your relevance allows you to. With AI's availability of being able to really begin to extract relevant content in such a more unique, individualistic way, that instead of the model of trying to influence that process, instead you pay for the success of that process.
Well, that's what hotel price ads are when you do a CPA, right? I mean, to a degree,
I'm talking about because of our ability to track even more effectively and so forth.
Right. But I mean, that's the first step to that.
To be able to say, hey, we're driving business because of your high relevancy, and we're generating this business that we can measure and track. So you can pay towards us the ability for this exposure to still be given to you. That's one side thing. But to go back to your point about what I agree with, but I think there may be an added component to this, is I think back to the times when there's Robert again. We stopped pissing him off. He decided to join us again.
No, this gentleman I need to reach is on the crossing the French-Spain border, so he's somewhere up there. And
you just have to tell us we're not as important as anybody else. We got it. It's okay.
This guy's pretty important.
Wait, Lauren's in the middle of a point, though. Okay. Let's let him finish.
So what I'm trying to say is that back then we believed our own stink. We were still coming into the market where we thought we were controlling the message. We thought we were in mitigation of what we were bringing to product. And IBM was probably a poster child of that. They transitioned us from having computer rooms with cables and stuff that was unattainable unless you were a massive corporation to now putting a computer in your home that you could use a computer. They were the first. Yep. I mean, yes, you had the Commodores and everything else, but you know, the Atari stuff, gaming and stuff. Okay.
Apple.
No, I'm not going to go down a wormhole.
The Apple II beat the IBM
I know, but the point of it is that they dictated the market. So for them, missing the mobile thing was because either they were ill-positioned in research or availability or technology, or they just felt that they weren't deciding that they were going to introduce that component because they thought they were so big, they had the choice to make.
I disagree. I think
back then. I'm talking about mid-90s. Remember, back then with the cell phones, it was so expensive to own one, and as soon as you flip the damn thing on, it started ticking like a time meter at a taxi in New York.
No, I get that. I'm saying no. There's a great theory on this that if you look at who the disruptors are over time, disruptors only come about for two reasons, right? Either because there's some startup who's trying to solve some problem that nobody big, it's a problem that's at the margins, right? It isn't worth it for Microsoft when they own 90% of the desktops in the world to worry about mobile because it was way too small, right? So that's a reason that happens. Or big companies pivot and succeed, and it happens occasionally, but not very often, when they are forced to because they're doomed, right? Because they're screwed, right? And there aren't a lot of examples of people doing it successfully, but they innovate,
out of necessity.
It's very out of necessity, right? Because the alternative, Microsoft, I think, is doing some incredibly innovative stuff technology-wise these days because they've been forced to.
Yep.
But they missed mobile not because they were so caught up in their own stink, to use your term, but because A, it was marginal at the time, and B, I do think
I don't respect that. I think there was some very brilliant people at IBM that saw the long distance future of it. Okay, that weren't the Yahoo people that told Sergey to leave the door. I think they saw the future.
You mean Microsoft?
Excuse me. Microsoft, IBM, and Microsoft both have brilliant people, but I think they saw where things were progressing, the availability and the opportunities. I think what they thought is that they could mitigate and control its arrival point through themselves if they controlled the message. And what happened is it got ahead of them, it got around them. And in part, I think because of the legal precedence that was happening at the time, Microsoft, as Stuart said, took their eye off the ball. If you want to look at the age of a company in the sense of a maturity level, IBM, I look at it as a late 40s, early 50s person that has got a few notches on their belt of stuff. They've learned the lessons they've learned through the trials that they've done. And you're looking at Google as a 30-year-oldish, and you're looking at Facebook as a late 20-ish. Okay? I'm just in the sense of where they are.
The generation of where they,
each generation is where they are. Because the 30-ish-year-old is thinking that they're going to be able to do it better than they've seen anybody older than them do it. And they think that they are using the resources of the people that are younger than them that know what's coming up next. So they're in that dangerous part of thinking that they're in that nexus of happiness. You have the Facebook people that think that they have to prove everything and be better than everybody. And I think this personal opinion as to how I see progressively their approach into their market style. Right now, the stumbling block, I think, to your point, to validate what you're saying, is profound for Google based on what you're talking about them, is that it's going to distract them.
I do think
to make them think differently about how they move forward in their processes, and the Facebooks of the world and so forth are going to go over and think that this is a good chance to kind of get a better coordination with them. And the older, mature Microsoft is going to look and say, "Yeah, we went down that road, and we know the lessons you don't know, so we're going to take advantage of it too."
I think again, I agree with Stuart that this could be huge for Bing. This could be huge for Microsoft. They are able to compete by doing things that Google may not be able to do because they're not a monopoly. Right. In the eyes of the
underdog. We all love underdogs.
Yeah. No, once they get up to in the EU, I think the threshold when you really start getting scrutiny is something like 15. I think there's one threshold at 15 and another one like 30%. Right.
Of the market, you were saying.
Yeah, of the market. And I think you kind of
I don't know the answer to that.
Tier up to it. But yeah, I just look at the complexity of Google still is and the same thing as Amazon. I follow Scott Galloway. I keep bringing him up on this show, but his point that they're taking what the consumers want and using it as a weapon against these brands, right? So, that's a very, very big challenge because they're basically taking these brands who have, high margins and saying, oh, it's such and such shoe or it's such and such this. And then all of a sudden they go, nah, that's not as important. They just want a good product at a good price. And hey, we can deliver that to them and put them in the top slot because
you're saying Google though.
Yeah, Google's. But that's one dimension of it. That's not the whole thing. Then you have the other side of who's bidding the most for it. It has nothing to do with what the consumer wants, right? At all. So you go, no, I'm going to give the person who paid me the most to put their shitty product in the top slot. And Google's put in some things to, have quality so that doesn't.
Yeah, that's why quality score makes such a difference.
That's why quality score makes a huge difference.
Click-through rates and things like that.
Yeah, but again, you can look at that and go, well, that isn't really pure for the for the consumer, right? So that's something that's doing it. And Google wants to make margins on it because they're creating so much value because of their dominance and that. And you kind of go, well, those are all sorts of things that all those functions need to work, right, in the ecosystem. So how do you break that up without suddenly screwing brands, if you do it this way, screwing consumers, or making this thing where you can't make, you have a marketplace where you've undermined the ability to make money, right? So that's.
So I want to give credit where due, and I'm looking for the person who said this. I've mentioned this Stratechery site before. I'm actually a subscriber to their proprietary content, and they have message boards and things. So I have a lot of discussions with folks, and somebody on the boards earlier today made a point that I can't find, so I can't credit the right person, but at least the source. So if you want to join, you can find. His point that I thought was very spot on was, if you look at Google's mobile experience, where you pull up mobile and you do a search, and the first thing you get is a whole crap ton of ads, and you got to scroll way down to get to the content that you really want. And sometimes that's not always great. And then there's more ads and all this other kind of stuff. They said if any other website were to do that to a customer, Google would say that website was spam and they would rank worse.
Yeah, they don't.
So Google is playing by
a different set of rules. They're playing by the
doing for other folks, and that is a monopolistic behavior and probably not great from a customer perspective. Whether the ads are high quality or not is, I don't want to say it's immaterial to the discussion, because they could make the argument that the difference is these ads are better ads, but it doesn't change the fact that they are definitely playing by a different set of rules. And when you're a monopolist, by definition, you're not allowed to in any jurisdiction. That's the very definition of being evil as a monopolist, right?
It's a little different, because it's not that they're not playing to the legal rules; they're playing to the rules that they define.
That's what I'm saying, right? They're setting one standard for everybody else, and then playing by an entirely different standard.
Yes.
Than the one they set for everybody else.
But that's what I do with my kids in soccer. I say they have to follow these rules, but if I trip them out, that's not a free kick.
No, that's good. That's an advanced rule set. That's an advanced.
That's a life lesson. Yeah.
By the way, also that's okay. That's completely okay. I come on. Who hasn't had this discussion?
That's a different lesson that's being learned. That's a different.
Who hasn't had this discussion with their children? That when I make a rule for my kids and I follow a different rule, this ain't a democracy, folks.
Do what I say, not what I do.
Right.
Now, for our younger audience, please keep in mind that the terms "your own stink," "shitty," and "crappy" are not words you should use in public environments. All right. Hey,
okay. Well, no. I think we should segue on to Expedia having some issues again in the EU with rate parity, because that was another story that came out this week. So a little bit of complexity. That again, rate parity is fine in the U.S., but it's not in the EU. All the case law basically says, no, these vertical price constraints are monopolistic and constrain trade. So what got worked out was this kind of light parity that Booking.com had, and France was the first one of the first ones who went, hey, you can't do this, so that's fine. Booking.com comes back with this kind of light parity where, hey, we'll just have parity with that hotel sort of thing, and they can do these different things that are out of channel, but if they're selling on their website, we kind of have to be the same. They can do different things on the phone or direct. And actually the French Competition Authority said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Except then the politicians got involved, and they then made a rule. Nope, it's illegal completely. And so all of a sudden you had kind of they went in a different direction. The Competition Commission just went to the courts, and the courts looked and went, that's a law.
So who wants to channel Ed since he's on vacation, which is why he's not with us today? Who wants to channel Ed on his opinion of rate parity?
Oh, well, Ed and I couldn't agree more on rate parity.
Go ahead.
Ed and I are absolutely aligned. Being out of parity if you're a hotel is really, really stupid. You're doing a terrible, terrible, terrible thing for your business in the long run. I get that you have a note to pay every month. I get that you need to fill rooms when you need to. I get that there are probably ways that you can offer people a value add, which is a better way of offering a discount if you're doing it to a closed user group and the like, you know, like your own best customers or things along those lines. But being out of parity to a general consumer audience across the board is teaching your customers to keep shopping for a better rate. And ultimately, it's only going to hurt you. Thus, forget what the law is. You should be in parity always, everywhere, every single time, without exception, apart from the couple of things I said before. Because otherwise, you are just hurting your business.
Gratuitous golf clap.
Yeah.
That's good. And I'm going to stay out of this one because I've made my position clear, and it's going to be real tough to convince
I know. I think you're a little fuzzy on that. I'm really not sure.
It's okay to have.
So you're saying there are lots of situations where really opportunistically you can be out of parity almost all the time. No,
Robert, I'm going to find a bat and I'm going to come.
No, I am completely in your camp on this one, to the point that I will go on the records that all the hotel companies that are save 10% to book direct is a moronic strategy. That
made sense back in the late 90s when you were trying to get people to book online a specific way, right?
Yeah. Different behavior off of a phone or something like that.
Right.
But you are going to lose.
And it also, and probably in an evil sense, I have to say it takes the sweetness of victory out when you have to change the things to beat your competitors. I much rather beat my competitors with their own stick. That if I'm at rate parity and I'm beating them in market because I can beat them at rate parity of everything else I'm distributing in market, that's a much sweeter win to being better at your marketing strategy and better as a product in market than it is that you'd have to go down to the bottom basement and dwell under there to try to get rate out of it and undercut everybody to get business.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
we're getting ready to do a new travel study. We partnered with Triptease, who will be the first to tell you how important rate parity is, because that's their whole model, right? Mm-hmm. But we're looking at the relationship between consumers and the OTAs and in the hotel's own website. And so some of the questions we've asked, and I'm not going to reveal it all because we haven't really dug and analyzed the results, but this is one of our typical studies. We asked 2,000 leisure travelers in North America their opinions on stuff, and a lot of yes/no answers, a lot of quantifiable answers. Mm-hmm. People are shopping not just property, and when people say they're looking at 30 plus sites, what we're finding is they're only looking at like 4 or 5 different hotels, but they're looking at the rate for that same hotel 7 or 8 times.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no confidence that they're getting the best deal because of this mess of parity. So if you look at what the OTAs do really well, and I'm going to say it again and again, Booking.com does better than anyone else. The reassurance they give a guest when they come to Booking.com that they are making the right decision and put that forward pressure through the conversion funnel, that they eliminate any kind of concern. They answer every single question. That's what the hotel website needs to do. Don't get them thinking about rate. Reassure them this is the best rate and push them through. Give them reasons to book, not reasons to leave, get exposed to your competition.
And assurance that they're getting the best value.
Yes, correct.
Right? I mean, absolutely rate plays an enormous role in that. But it's Stuart, preach, brother. I am there completely. Right? But it's are you telling them that, you can shop around all you want, you're not going to find a better value for what you're doing right now.
There was at HITEC, to going this back full circle, there was a new company that I think's only been around a year or two, but Stay Wonderfully was there.
Oh, yeah.
And
Stay Wonderful.
And they have a very unique model. It's an incentive for primarily independent hotels that want to do loyalty programs. But they've gone and partnered with a bunch of retailers. So you've got people like JCPenney and Uber and Starbucks. And basically, a hotel can create a loyalty program that if someone books directly with the property, they then get to pick 2 or 3. And the hotel can decide the value of it. But they basically get to pick some of these instant discounts or instant gift cards to retail stores that aren't related to the hotel, but offer unique incentives for them to book direct. And I was talking to them at HITEC. They seem to be doing growing pretty rapidly. But that's the kind of stuff you can do. You can get creative. Whenever you're competing on rate, it's a zero-sum game.
That's
because
exactly
you're going to get lower,
Yep.
they're going to get lower, and it just goes down, and your margins shrink, and you end up going out of business. So
Right.
you've got to find ways to
either going out of business or making compromises on your operational
exactly.
side.
Yeah, and then your
we can't
goes
spend
down,
this.
and your
Your
ADR
product
goes
goes down, and then your reviews go down,
Yeah.
and the death spiral.
So
ADR,
I
you cut
just-
your occupancy.
I just posted a link to a blog post that I wrote years ago called "The Race
Bingo.
You Can't Win." This is yeah. Well, I have to.
So let's talk about things you can offer, right? You can offer early check-in,
Right.
late checkout. You can we got one property that gives everyone that books direct, they get a $10 gift card to their arcade, costs them nothing. Actually, it's like crack to those kids, right?
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
now they spend $10, they go back to mommy and say, I need another 50. So they're making like 10 grand a day in their arcade just because they're giving away these free $10 things.
That's
You can
fantastic.
give F&B, get people to go to your restaurant or to your bar by offering a free appetizer with a paid entree or some kind of discount at the bar. There's so many creative things you can do that just make the guests feel welcome, feel better, feel like they have a better relationship with your property if they book direct. But you go to 90% of hotel websites, there's not even message of booking direct and why it matters.
Right.
Communication, it's so important.
Well, and I think there's a big problem for the hotel industry. Okay, so they started off with this sign up for the loyalty program, save. People think it's 10%, but it winds up being 2 to 3. So one, it's artificially high expectations, so you start disappointing people immediately. But then I think the other side, so that's a problem, and it kills the owner's profitability, right? Because you're discounting your highest yielding customer. But then I think the secondary thing, where I think Stay Wonderful, who did win the innovation award or whatever, the thing for HITEC this year.
Oh, at HITEC this year.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
E20X or whatever it is. Yeah, E20X. It's the innovative platform award. But what's happening now is they're now getting this huge influx of people into their loyalty program, and these guys are not at the head of the snake. They're all kind of in the mid-long tail sort of thing, and now they're accumulating points and stuff, which they can't do anything with because there's no value. They don't stay enough. I mean, Hyatt just redid their program. Really good for the super high people. The folks in the middle of the end, not so good. And it's going to be a real problem because all of a sudden you go, great, well, I did this to get this discount, and now I got points. I'm in their program. I can't trade these for anything. And they're just completely worthless. So why should I do this? So all of a sudden you're reinforcing this. You've made a bad mistake. And that's like, okay, well, I guess I'll stay there because they keep giving me a discount and, free Wi-Fi. I saw actually at the Rock session, somebody said what you should really do is lay out the quantification of how much you'd have to pay for all of this stuff. If you didn't book direct, you'd have to pay $20 for Wi-Fi, and you'd have to pay such and such for this. And I kind of looked at it and went, really? You want to be the guy who says you're going to charge people $20 for Wi-Fi?
Exactly right.
You look like an asshole.
Well, and the other thing about value add,
another word for that young children don't need to use today. Asshole.
That's right. Well,
but another thing about value, the other thing about value adds you want to keep in mind is, in a perfect world, it should be hard for people to understand the value of those value adds, right?
Yeah.
Because the tougher it is for people to understand what that's worth, the more difficult it makes them to compare like for like, which is kind of what you want. You want them to go, well, I should just book here because I get all of these things that I can't just easily hang a dollar value on, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm gonna ironically, this is gonna be different because I'm not usually one inclined to disagree with Stuart because he's way smarter than me. I'm going to agree in the premise. I'm going to disagree in the process.
It's because Stuart's injured, so he's taking advantage. He thinks he can run faster than he can.
Okay. I agree in the premise of what Trip Tease represents. I agree in the premise of what Stay Wonderful represents. I am adamantly negative as to the process of what they do. Because how they validate their value proposition, I've been doing A/B testing with them a lot. And with them and with other types of when you enter them into your direct channel feed. And I love the premise of what they're doing. As you said, the exclusion of comparison so that there's a validation of purchase. Absolutely all for it. I mean, I'm completely happy in the validation of rewarding immediate gratification, the value of direct bookings that Stay Wonderful represents.
You sound like you're agreeing with me, not disagreeing right now. That's good.
No,
Sound like you're agreeing with me, not disagreeing.
There's going to be
I agree with the premises of both of those, but under the hood mentality of what they're doing, how they're measuring and how they're quantifying and how they're monetizing, I am not happy with.
Sure, I 100% agree. I'm not in any way saying that the metrics that have been used to justify the value of them are correct, but I agree. We're actually on the same page. Maybe I did not.
The premise of it, I absolutely showing validation, showing comparison, alleviating those distractions that people inherently do. All for all that process. Unfortunately, their current methodology is not one that I can endorse because
I mean, let's be candid. Every vendor in the market provides metrics and data that really swing heavily in their favor, right? You look at
what? No,
I know,
believe
right?
it or not, when someone like Sojourn gives 100% attribution on view conversions, you probably want to question that.
Do you know what I found? Okay, not to go geek out here, but I learned about the term mutations. And I didn't know what mutations were, that you can absolutely freaking manipulate Google Analytics raw data through your Google Analytics platform by creating mutations of addressing them differently so that you think it's Google Analytics data and it has been altered by quantity or quality, the data you're using.
Sure.
That blew my mind.
That's where the whole idea of Google Analytics spam comes from.
Yeah.
No, okay, maybe we're talking about the same thing, but I'm talking about where you can say I got 1,000 visitors for XYZ, and you can mutate the data source and the type so that you say I have
We're talking about exactly the same thing.
Blows my mind. It's like you're taking the truth from the raw data that Google is giving you and making it different. I know. It's one of those. I realized there was no Santa Claus here.
All sorts of customized sets. Yeah.
Which, by the way, is why we always talk to people about, we always measure things like actual reservations and reservation revenue and things along those lines. As a buddy of mine once said, it was a brilliant line. He said, we don't deposit transactions into the bank. We deposit revenue, right? We deposit cash.
Yep.
That's the ultimate arbiter. We're doing a test with somebody right now, and I'm not going to highlight who the test is because the data is not flattering, and I'm not convinced it's right yet. But they're claiming that they're driving all this extra business, all this extra traffic and stuff. And ultimately, the number of heads and beds at the end of every month since we've been running the test has been relatively consistent with projections prior to actually implementing this thing.
Right.
So, I'm not convinced it's working.
Right. It's like back in the day, TripAdvisor was like that, right? Before TripAdvisor was earlier in the funnel, and it was just I want to book this, but I don't want my wife to get mad at me, so I better get some kind of third-party validation before I get in trouble. Yeah. It was right at the end. People already had made the decision, but they went to TripAdvisor just in case. Right. And if you were advertising on TripAdvisor at the time, your revenue, your ROI was like 10, 11, 12 to 1 every time. And you ended up spending tens of thousands of dollars a month. But then you look at your occupancy, and there was no difference. You're like, well, why am I spending all this extra money if I'm not getting any more reservations?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Exactly the same thing. So data's like the force, right? You talk about data being the crown jewels a lot, Tim.
Yeah.
Exactly right. But you can be a Jedi with data and use it for good, and you can be a Sith and you can lose it.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. No, that's absolutely right. I need to
like
figure out how to
redo
my I need to think about how to redo my content is king, customer experience is queen, and data is the crown jewels to turn it into, content is Luke. Contact customer experience is Leia.
But you can't do that. But then you're going to need to do another go.
No.
Besides, it's more Star Trek. Okay, so just
data can be the crown
jewels, and
data can be the crown jewels. They're just kyber crystals now. You can do one thing. You can make them blue.
The data are the dilithium crystals. Oh my god.
Oh lordy. Okay, so I want to do one quick thing on. I want to do one quick thing on price, just because it's funny. And I owe Robert Cole for this. I used this for years. Now, talk about things we don't want kids doing, right? One of the fundamental principles of the internet that we have to remember is it creates price transparency. Your customers know more about your products and your services and your prices than your employees do, because they have more incentive to.
Right.
But anyone who doubts that There's a website that Robert Cole was the first person to ever tell me about this. I've used it in presentations for years. And unfortunately, I can't use it any longer because the reality is changing. But there is a website called priceofweed.com.
That wasn't me.
Yeah, it was absolutely you. And it told you what's the average price in your area, what are the legal and social implications, and things like that. It was TripAdvisor. It was a ratings and review / meta search site for a product that at the time you could not buy legally in almost every place where it operated.
Information wants to be free.
Information wants to be free, right? So you're not going to compete on price by thinking I'm going to have a lower price over here and a different price over here and win. You're going to lose. Period.
Well, you can do kind of short-term low play, but when people find out,
you can't.
But when people find out that they are paying more than they needed to, they get pissed.
That's the problem. You think it's a trick, right? It's like a drug. You think it works to start with, and you think you can get away with it. But at some point, inevitably, you're going to get caught.
And the reality, too, the reason I put the race you can't win post up a moment ago was because you guys were talking around this. This is a well-established principle. It's named after somebody. I can't remember what. But you get soft business results. So you lower prices to boost demand.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately,
share, but not
unfortunately, no. Well, unfortunately, your short-term sales might improve, but your competitors respond, which just drives down the price for everybody. So then you either have to cut service or marketing to sustain this, which also shifts customer expectations of what your price should be. The experience suffers, and you have a short-term loss again, or you start driving a loss, and it just fuels this death spiral.
Yeah. And you really, the opposite works better.
Yeah.
Right? So before we fuel specialized in hospitality, we had a lot of retail clients. We had some apparel clients. We had some.
Or did you make a good move?
Well, we still have that side of the business. That's just the company still does that. But we had, shirt companies that would sell essentially polo shirts, and the manufacturing cost for both of them was the same, $12. And we have one that would set prices at like $80, $90, and one would be $50. And every time anything like that happened, the higher price would always way outsell. Right. And we have one, I'm not going to mention the brand name, but there's a very big cooler company that's had a lot of success in the last few years.
Yeti.
I'm not going to neither confirm nor deny. When we worked with them for a little while with their social media, but they almost went bankrupt. They were really struggling to sell this company that may or may not be someone that you guys just mentioned. But they were close to going bankrupt. They had very limited inventory left, and they just needed to liquidate it. So what they did is they gave it to Costco and tripled the price of what it had been selling for, and it immediately started selling, and it changed their business. So when you spend $400 on a cooler that really costs the same to manufacture as any other cooler, it was just a complete positioning thing, just a mental switch in people's head. It becomes a status at that point. Hotels can do the same,
Hotels should do the same. I mean,
but hotels have a problem because there's a lot of interchangeable product too. And again, with shirts and things like that, there's certainly a case, but you got a lot of, I'm not sure what Lauren's doing. Are you guys seeing strange video here, or maybe he's screen sharing? I don't know.
There it is.
Grow. Yeah.
You shared this, Robert.
Anyway, but yeah.
Oh, Robert.
We lost Robert. Oh, there he is. Robert shared this, and I thought it works into our conversation a little bit.
Oh, that's what you're putting up there. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. This I thought was very interesting. Again, this came from L2 Inc.
Yep.
And our friend Scott Galloway. Yeah. The affluence. Then again, this is affluence. This isn't millennial. These are people with money, rich people, sort of thing. 2008 to 2015. Look at luxury hotel has the most precipitous 30-point difference.
Yeah.
The other ones are 18, 20 point, 30-point difference of not being able to name a favorite luxury. That's not good.
That's unconscionable.
Yeah.
That's I mean, as somebody who used to sell luxury hotels, that just makes me want to puke all over the floor. That is awful.
Me too. That with everything that's gone on in that industry, that should be going absolutely the other direction. Yeah.
Yeah. So I should have warned you that I was going to make the flippy change, stuff, but it just seemed applicable based on what you were talking about. It's like you're talking about, and to your point, Robert, the affluent people, if anybody is brand conscious, the affluent purchaser usually is, because they're brand sensitive more than most. Because as soon as people start finding out that most of the brand percentage, there was a neat stat that went out of Statistica that the local grocery store here in Texas, or more than Texas, Kroger, they have the largest generic or their brand on the shelves compared to other grocers, because they were doing this whole conversation about the Whole Food acquisition by Amazon. Yeah. They have 33% of the total shelf space is for their generic product as well, which is exceptionally high in comparison to others. Others are in the teens and the low 20s at best. And they're talking about the fact that Amazon is, in fact, usually 50% and above when it comes to their brand versus what they display. And it was kind of funny that when discussed about it, people were agnostic to the process in the quotes they were putting into the article, that they have long since realized that at the same manufacturing plant, the machines stop and the labels get shifted and the same product still rolls out, but now it's put into the XYZ brand label compared to the ABC brand label. And a lot of these generic value ones are the same product. So, to your point, the brand recognition, which to the hotel side, if anything, with all these 32 flavors of vanilla ice cream coming out with Marriott and the new IHG yet to be figured out between Holiday Inn Express stuff, it looks like they're groping in the dark for trying to find the thing that turns the light switch on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and actually, a fun thing at the grocery store, it's hard in a lot of other brands to see, because the packaging is different. But go look at milk, and you'll go, okay, high end brand, what Borden or something like that might be there. But you look at like the little symbols of the date stamps and everything, and go down, and you'll probably find the store brand came from the same place. They have exactly the same, basically index codes and things like that. And again, they just slap the same label, and the milk's $2. It's 40% price premium for the brand. And again, going back to Galloway, that is his whole point, is that Amazon is destroying that brand, because in collusion with the consumer, going, wait a second, why am I paying for marketing and this and all that? It's the same stuff. Why should that be a high margin purchase? Because
if a luxury hotel can't fight that trend, they're doing something very wrong.
Very wrong.
Right. And a lot of them are, because
I would question, and I'm not gonna pick on a specific brand here. You can insert whichever one you prefer at the moment. But you look at some properties. Okay, you guys know my bias. I like independence a lot, right?
A lot.
Me too.
I have nothing against chains. I worked for Super 8. Super 8's a great product, right? But if you're a luxury hotel, each experience needs to be distinct. Needs to. If you are another box of rooms, just like any other box of rooms anywhere else, that provides good service. I mean, the folks who carry the flags, who are luxury flags, do a good job from a service perspective. But it's awfully the same everywhere you go. That's, I think, part of the reason why they're losing that.
But you don't need a gimmick, right? It's more about you want to surprise and delight people. You want the experience to be remarkable. You want it to be memorable. So it doesn't necessarily have
authentic,
to be different. It's exceptional and authentic, and true to who you are. If you look at some of the best award-winning places in Europe, and especially if you look at places like Ireland, there are small inns that win awards year after year. And when you talk to these people, it's just about authentic hospitality, and we've lost sight of that's really what matters. It's not about the color scheme or the branding or the gimmick, or leaving a pineapple in the room. It doesn't really matter. It's still about personal experience in interacting with your guests and making them feel good.
No, now, to bring out the bingo cards, to bring in the conversation of what Flip2's success is really hinged upon, since Ed's not here and on vacation, we are literally talking about the conveyance of the message to the people that care the most, from the people that experienced it directly, and talk about the quality that they experienced and not the hype, the gimmickiness, the branding. It was about their experience and the sharing of that experience that drives the interest for the next generation or next category of people to come visit that product.
That's right.
And that's really what we're talking about, is the next generation of communication. Even though we talk about the Google searchabilities and everything else, it's really about the ability to get the message out to the people that are interested, listening to the people that they pay attention to.
Right.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and get your bingo card with, I'll go back to the transition of Four Seasons from being.
We got 4 seasons.
I know. I had to. in the wheelhouse. But when they transitioned from kind of just a real mishmash of hotels, I mean, they had 1,200 room convention hotels and suburban resorts. They had all sorts of stuff. But when they really looked at it, the first thing they totally figured out, and again, this was years ago, 30 years ago, they figured out it wasn't really the physical plan of yes, you needed to have a quality hotel, but it wasn't having the most opulent chandeliers and over the top gold leaf and things like that. It was what tied into an authentic experience in that city where you went there and it was different and unique and it reflected that city's personality. So at the time when they had the Olympic in Seattle, that was a really different experience than the Mandalay in Dallas versus the Inn on the Park in Houston. And all three of those hotels opened in the same year, sort of thing. And I mean, two of them were built, from the ground up. One was an acquisition, but they were really uniquely tied in. And what made them uniquely tied into that city wasn't necessarily, you could have a unique physical plant, right? And that was good. You want certainly good quality, but it was the staff. Right. I mean, it was the three most important people in a hotel are still the general manager, the chef, and the concierge, because they all general manager sets the tone for service, the chef for the quality of the food and the attention to detail, and the concierge for I can make your experience amazing, right? And if you can cover those three pillars, you are solid. And even if you're an economy, if you're a Super 8, and you're the general manager of a Super, you don't have a chef and a concierge, but if you can actually serve that hat as, the general manager, yes, it's clean, it's priced right, the hotel's located where it is. Here's what we are good at. Here are the people who stay here, and you want a great chicken fried steak in wherever, because that's what your people. Here's the place to go. Or I know this guy with barbecue who can go get you this stuff.
That's right. Robert, I will say this. I said this last time you did before. I wish you would be in front of some of my clients, because I literally quote you on that 3 statement every time. Like, dudes, it's not about your
Robert
rooms
is
or your
available for.
I am.
I know. I'm trying to get him to the bar mitzvah, but you know what? He just. But by the same token,
was it Stuart? $1 million. I keep it very simple. The retainer's $1 million a year. It's payable in advance, and it's all you can eat. It's
Robert, I just need one word. I just need one word from you. What school did you go to?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, give it to me. Give it to me.
Come on, you guys must know.
I've never mentioned on this thing. Sun Valley Resort.
Hey, I did hear it a few times at HITEC. I will say that.
It's the only thing I'm missing on my bingo card. Give it to me. Come on.
You guys must know the
lots of Cornell Mafia marching around.
There it is. Bingo.
Go Big Red.
You're welcome. Yep, go big. Let me tell you, the Cornell Mafia there was out in force as always.
As always.
Hey, they're no match against what is it? Stuart and the kitty keepers.
To prove we are not beholden to anybody. Okay. Let me take a piece out of Cornell. Cornell is doing an incredible disservice to the industry right now, because since Bill Carroll retired, 2 years ago, they have not had digital marketing classes or anything, or social media.
He was the vanguard of that. I spoke at one of his classes. Yeah.
Yep. And unfortunately, because the school has gone through some really tough time. I mean, or I shouldn't say tough times, but Bill left, and then the dean announced he was leaving, because they do kind of these 10-year circuits on that sort. So they had a dean transition, and then the school became part joined with the business school,
which
and
over like
what is agriculture, which was talk about. They have a huge branding issue.
Yeah.
Because it used to be called, they finally cleaned it up. It was just called the Hotel School, which was very clean, very specific. Like, why look anywhere else?
I also don't think their certification program has caught any traction either. They ran their whole certification program startup, and that's been kind of tossed around like a tumbled dice right now. There's no validation. Nobody's recognizing it for any value proposition other than, it's an online class.
When in reality, they should own that territory. But so now so they're in there. They now finally, the interim dean that they had is now the dean. So hopefully they can start making some, because again, they couldn't get a dean for a while because the dean of the hotel school reports to the dean of this business college now. And so all of a sudden there are budget things. Are you going to get the top people? I mean, we'll really see the school could just go, straight down, which would be tragic. But we'll see. But they've got to do those
institutions of education
for revenue management. And I was talking to their people between revenue management, digital marketing, social, all of that really practical. Not just this, and they don't even cover the strategies. I can't even go that. The strategies aren't getting covered. The tactics aren't getting covered. It's a gap, and it's not good. They need to raise the bar.
What's up, Tim? By the way, I'm envious of your haircut. I gotta get my haircut, dude. You're reminding me of this.
Oh, you get used to the new. This is
it's nice. Yeah, I like.
This is the future.
I like it. It looks good. I mean, it reminds me. I got shag top going on here. I got to go get it. Right now, we're in the midst of it.
Unfortunately, I did a video for Rutgers University, and somebody took a screenshot of it and sent it to me, and I decided, I'm shaving my head. It was not a good look.
Bless their heart.
I think Lauren
I was planning to just grow my eyebrows really long and just comb them straight back.
Just do a Trump and do the comb over. What the hell?
I do have to tell one quick story, and unfortunately I got to run in a moment, but I got to tell one quick story that's just funny. I was at my dry cleaner the other day, and this is actually like 4 months ago, but nonetheless, I was at my dry cleaner, and as I was walking out of the dry cleaner, who should be walking in but Bill Carroll?
What?
He retired to my town.
Get out of here. Really?
Yeah, he lives about couple miles from me. We went and got coffee.
Well, he was always from Jersey. Did he move in Jersey? He was always there.
He lived in Ithaca during the school year anyway. But
but he always had a place in Jersey. That was always his home, though.
In respect for Bill's privacy, I probably have already said too much. His family lives not far, various parts of the country, various parts of the tri-state area down here, and so he wanted to be someplace somewhat centrally located to his family. So
okay. Hey, just real quick while I have you for the next couple of minutes, Tim, just shotgun things. Any comments about the fact that the GOP data got cracked out to 200 million people and then it went dead quiet afterwards?
Well, I'm certainly not going to get into the politics of it. I think it speaks to why cybersecurity was such a big deal at HITEC this year. It's core foundational. I think if you transact business online, if you're connected to the internet in any way, shape, or form, there's really two buckets of people. Those who have been hacked and those who will. So, as you're getting into budget season and you're not budgeting for securing your customers' data, since data is the crown jewels, you're
the Kyber crystals. We call them the Kyber crystals now. They're the Kyber crystals.
It's the force. Data is the force.
Okay. Well, if it's the dilithium crystals, your starship is going to be dead in the water when dead in the space when somebody hacks all your damn data. So.
Well,
it can happen to anybody. Protect your data, for God's sakes.
Protect your jewels? Is that what you're saying? Protect your jewels?
Protect your jewels. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's actually a joke.
For God's sake, use a cup.
Yeah, all right, on that note, Tim, where can people find you? Should they want to find you? Oh.
One last point before we do that. The other thing is you may not lose the data, right? Because they might not even get access to it, but now with all this malware which comes in and ransomware, you just lock out access, right? They just have to hit. They just have to hit that layer. they might not be able to get to your data, but now they can make it so
But
you
then
can't.
neither can you.
Neither can you. Yeah.
And
yeah.
that's a problem.
Maersk is one of the biggest shipping concerns
Amazing,
in the
isn't
world.
Huge.
Literally, right now, they are running their entire shipping operation the way that they did 20 years ago.
Yeah. Take that red box and put it over there. Put the blue box over there. Yeah.
Because that's the only way they can function at the moment.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in that position.
No.
You know, I'm not qualified. I'm probably the least qualified person on this show today, and probably the least qualified person on this show any day to talk about what the right answer to this is in terms of the vendors you should be looking at or the like. But you need to get good at this, and you need to find vendors who are good at this, and you need to make sure you have security.
We should probably do a show on security.
Probably
Like, get some, a
Actually,
vendor on
yeah, because ironically, with my family coming from Europe, my wife's side, we've talked about. They've asked me, being the geekhead of the family, what they should do. And the best suggestion I have about some things, because they're worried about when they cross the border that their phones can be now looked at. They have to be unlocked and open.
Yeah.
And I've given them instructions about how to erase their phones, blank them out, have everything up in the cloud. Go through the transition of getting here, and then when you get over here, dump the data back in and restart the phone.
Yeah.
That way you hand over a dead phone. Here you go. There's your thing.
You've seen the product they're trying to get legal in some states where the police now can basically confiscate your phone and plug it in, and they can see all your activity.
Oh, yeah.
If there's a driving violation, they can see if you're texting.
Which the Supreme Court has ruled is illegal, by the way. That's a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights.
But they're tying it together. Can we inspect your vehicle? And by being vehicle, the phone's in the vehicle and discovered. Right. But I mean, they're getting a little loose.
Look at the Supreme Court ruling on that. The Supreme Court ruling was abundantly clear that there is a different there's a different level of privacy that you should expect around, data of yours that is not physically present. If they stop your car, they shouldn't be able to search through your house, kind of thing.
Right. No, good point. Yeah. Well, you know what? That just proved the point. We need to have a show a little bit more in depth and more topically driven about security in a specific forms, because I think we all have some pretty good insights to it.
And the one thing is, I think for hotels, just the number, especially having been in a conference, staying in hotels, all these open Wi-Fi spots. Boy, the number of people spoofing like AT&T Wi-Fi.
Oh yeah.
Because you got to, I log on and here are these hotspots, and I can just go. Really, really dangerous for I'll use the same password across all these sites. Sure. Yikes!
There's all these Internet of Things stuff that we're going to see hotels start to get into. And most of those are secured about as well as, things that aren't secured very well. I don't have a good analogy right now.
The word secure shouldn't be in the same sentence. Let's put that
very eloquently put, Tim.
Yeah, that's why I write for a living.
Hey, I could have used your brain power a few times. I was having writer's block a few times over. I'll have to ask you about a piece of software that helped me break it. But anyway, before you have to run, and I know I don't want to go on a tangent on something else.
Lauren used Fiverr. No, I'm just kidding.
I always subscribe to Seth Godin's mantra about this. And Lauren, this will be in your sweet spot, and Robert will be in your sweet spot, and it's certainly in mine. Poor Stuart can't get in a word sometimes, which is, he says people get writer's block. Nobody's ever had speaker's block.
No shit.
I actually use a lot of speech to text when I'm stuck. And
that's how one of the ways I broke it. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
All right. Tim, where can they find you, sir?
So I'm at timpeter.com or on Twitter using the Twitter handle @TCPeter.
And I post on your posts all the time. I am constantly one of your ardent supporters of
you. Actually. I appreciate that. That's really nice of you.
You post some good stuff. Good stuff and podcasts always. And please, I know we talk about Stuart's podcast all the time because it's that good, but also yours is by no means any schlep either, because it's I like the succinctness of it. And I like the succinctness of it. You don't where this show is the antithesis of that. Yours is very much about an A specific, and you keep very strong points to it.
So can I tell you a true thing about this? Robert and I had this discussion a long time ago. Robert's heard this before. So my blog is called Tim Peter Thinks. The podcast is called Tim Peter Thinks Out Loud. And in all seriousness, I started blogging years ago when I worked for a company. And literally, the reason it was called Tim Peter Thinks was it was on timpeter.com, because I had the domain at the time. And it literally was just a place where I was thinking out loud about stuff. Like, I didn't know answers to a lot of this stuff. I was simply going, what do I think about this? Let me put it. I found when I put it down on paper, it helped me be really, focused my thinking.
It came out. Yep.
Right. It forced me to be more structured around it. And sometimes the answer was, yeah, I don't know where this is going. Like the thing we talked about with Google and the EU before. I don't know where it's going. I know it ain't good for Google. Right. And when I do the Thinks Out Loud, it's the same thing. Usually the topics are things that I'm going to be addressing in talks at some point. And so I have to come up with an outline, and then I'm literally thinking out loud, but I try to keep it focused on that one thing, because I don't know if you've noticed, I can digress from time to time.
No.
But
maybe not for now.
A good high signal to ratio, 15 minutes.
Yeah, not for now, but I am going to ask you a question down the road. Would you ever take, with the new revenue generation of podcasts, which is getting news now, that podcast is a great place to start advertising. Would that be something you would accept, or would you think that it would change how you would do your podcast?
Actually, I can answer this. I'm in favor of podcasts if you have something to say. I think they're an interesting way to connect with your business, connect with your customer. I think they have great value in terms of reaching people via mobile in a distinct part of the mobile strategy for my business is, in fact, podcasts. Right. I already monetize my podcast because it is a source of leads for me. Right. It's not a huge source of leads. I want to be really, really clear. But also as a consultant, I don't need to close very many folks for it to pay for the time that I put into the podcast each year. So, I am already monetizing it. I don't do advertising on my website. I don't do advertising on my podcast. I wouldn't, because it's sort of sideways to my business. My business is about promoting my business a lot of times. When I do those kinds of things, that is a content marketing initiative. Right. If I were
to drive interest to you, yes, absolutely.
If I were a hotel and I was going to do, let me talk about my local area podcast. Let's talk about why you should come to South Carolina, why you should come to New Jersey, whatever it happens to be. Maybe you could do advertising, so long as it's the right kind of advertisers.
That's a tough one though for an out of town. Yeah,
exactly.
If you're a hotel, if you're pushing your local F&B or what's going on in the market, so you can be, here's a quick little what's happening. Talk to local people, or entertainment bands, whatever artists. You could maybe do something if your city or town doesn't have that could be something. But I think especially you want people to subscribe, right? The key things are, how do you get into the into the stores where people kind of see it and you bubble up and you get discovered, and you need some continuity on that, which is tough. The pure advertising also, again, I use Stitcher. I found that's the best kind of podcatcher that I use. But they have their little 30-second advance thing, and you can just go pow 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 pow. Oh, they only had a minute and a half of ads instead of 2 minutes. Here I'm back, and I think those things get skipped over because, again, and you can see the groups that are doing it. It's all MeUndies and Blue Apron and all these sorts of guys.
Casper mattresses and
all these guys are going all over podcast. They're almost everywhere, blanketing it. But I don't know.
Just curious.
We've had a lot of offers. We have a lot of vendors reach out to us to try to advertise on our podcast. And I'm not going to say we're never going to do it, but I don't want to be categorical, but it's very unlikely. Right. But to your point, Tim, it's a lead generator for us. Yeah. And even though the leads it doesn't generate directly, there's very few people that we have a conversation with now that aren't aware of it.
That's
so
right.
It's not just the leads, it legitimizes this as well.
Yeah.
And when we're at HITEC this year, we had a professor come over from Georgia.
Oh no, Stuart!
You raving about his students.
Well, no. If you mention a competing college, we have
He censored you, Stuart. He censored you. No,
say that froze. You froze right when you said a professor from a college.
Yeah, what happened? Oh, he's freezing again.
See, I'm preemptively killing him now.
Robert, stop hitting the
button. Stuart, you keep freezing up,
so we keep missing. Go back to the professor thing.
We've lost your audio.
That was me too.
You're an evil man, Mr. Robert. I wanted to hear what Stuart had to say.
Oh, we can hear. We can hear.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so he was saying how he's got his students listen to it, how he like it reinforces the stuff he's teaching. So for us, we're now feeling like maybe this is a market we need to
right.
hoteliers, right, which is our future market. So I think podcasts have a lot of value. I mean, I think you have to be smart if you're a hotel, how it makes sense. But if you're influencing culture in your location, then I think, maybe you're not going to get a lot of subscribers, but when people spend to the culture there or events going on, then podcasts are starting to show up, especially if you transcribe the episodes, they're starting to show up in search. So I think you can catch people on hyper-focused content as well through a podcast. And it's so much easier to create a podcast than it is to do a lot of other content creation, because you stick a microphone down or have Skype or some software and just start recording. It's the barrier to entry is zero.
Right.
Yeah, there's a hotel in Toronto, which is a big city, and it's a really small. They're probably 40 rooms or something. They're really pretty small, but they've got a really good bar. They hang a lot of art, from local artists. That's they're kind of this Queen Street West type thing. It's very cool, and they've got a they've got a podcast, they've got a blog. They do this, and it builds, and it's kind of like, hey, here's what's cool that's going on in this, and it's not like the whole thing, the Blue Jays are playing this weekend or weekend. It's like for their group of followers and their constituency, that's the go-to, which is great. I mean, that's huge opportunities for them.
I had to purge off of a platform I used to use called TalkShoe, podcasts from 2004 when I was doing podcasts called Save on Florida Travel and Florida Travel Guide that I was doing conveniently around where all my hotels were located. And I would interview the GM of the hotel talking about things to do in the market and so forth. And that's when you had to download and have a special player. But it was kind of fun to think that, you know what? At least I was smart way back then. I don't know what happened since then, but back then I was kind of smart.
Well, but that sort of thing is great. That's very opportune, and it made sense for your business, right? Because you had hotels, so it wasn't just you had a hotel and
that's right,
whatever, St. Petersburg, and you're trying to tell people all about the state, or it's promoted as promoting the state, but all you talk about is St. Petersburg, which then just turns people off.
Well, and it's a great way it's a great example of, you guys have both mentioned, you and Stuart specifically, Lauren, have mentioned two great content marketing tactics that I would absolutely encourage, regardless of the medium that you use. So one is using the content marketing to talk about the thing that ultimately is of interest to your customer, interest to your business, finding that overlap of where those two actually align, right? And then the second that Stuart brought up is content reuse. I do the podcasts. They are outlines for talks. They're or outlines for a section of a talk, right? I do a lot of paid speaking gigs. So some of that is just working out the ideas of what will become the talk that then I go back later and tighten up and write jokes and all that kind of stuff to make the talk a bit more interesting. But literally, if I have to do a 45-minute talk on a specific set of topics, I can take three podcast outlines, and now I've just modularized the talk. I can also take those and turn that into a slide share, which I can then turn into a blog post, which I can, and you just can do that same kind of stuff as a hotel to say, I'm talking about my local area. I'm going to do a video about it. I'm going to do the script. I'm going to transcribe, and that's going to become a blog post, and on and on and on. That cuts down the cost of creating content because you're not creating each piece as a standalone thing. You're creating a whole library of units that you can repurpose in different ways to actually, make the cost of creating content.
It was on our show a couple of weeks ago. We didn't get a chance to get to it, but Facebook, is opening up their audio shows. At first, they're still being used by the influencers only, the certifieds and stuff. Yeah. But that's coming into space now where Facebook, yet another territory to cover, is to say, okay, we got the live shows going on. Now we can do the live audio broadcast or the pre-recordeds. I mean, one of the tricks, just to loop for anybody to know, is that you take an animation, put that as your screen, and put the audio behind it. And you can put your podcast on your Facebook page if you want to, but it goes through as a video because it's just an animation that's running in the background while your audio runs.
This is probably something we don't have time to talk about today while I'm here, but we should have a discussion about content syndication someday and where your content should live. I have no problem with putting some stuff on Facebook to bring them back to my site. I do think people are running some risks when they create content for Facebook.
Very good point. That is actually a very solid point. Very solid point. But yes, you are right. We are going to lose you, and we're pretty much at the 2-hour mark anyway. But Stu, do you have a couple more minutes? Or you got to duck also?
Yeah,
Robert,
no, I can hang around for a second.
All right.
Yeah,
you all have a great holiday weekend. I don't know who's in and out of the office next week at various points, but I hope you have a great weekend. I will see you next Friday, and enjoy. Have a happy, safe, and healthy 4th.
Tim, the same for you. And I want to catch up with you later. I got a couple of platforms I want to share with you. I'm going to talk to the guys about AdWords as well.
Well, when we say later, it's going to be later next week because I am out of the office for the next 4 days.
No, you're good. I'm just going to send you some links you can look at.
And is next week the 100th? Is next week the 100th?
So next week is the 100th, July 7th, the 100th.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. Woo. I'll be there.
So you will be here, Tim?
I will be here.
Okay.
All right. Excellent, Tim. Thank you so very much.
Very good.
All right, gents. Have a great weekend. Bye now.
One last thing about the security thing, just I wanted to go in there before we lost it. The topic with it was one of my concerns about the places like these direct channel aggregates that are putting themselves on direct channel is that they are, for tracking purposes, has a free reign of the data they can pull also. And if you're not knowledgeable about how to limit their data pulls from your booking funnel, you're literally feeding them all the data that you're getting yourself. And you can't vouch for their security that if they get breached, all that data isn't covered. So there's that security aspect to it too. Is like you have to mitigate their actual data that they're getting to only the validation of their monetization model, contract requirements, or whatever. And that often isn't done. They're being allowed to do whatever they want to because usually the person on the other side of the conversation isn't completely fluent in that dialogue.
We do an analysis when we're looking at clients. One of the things we'll do is look at what different tracking pixels and things they have throughout their conversions funnel. It's insane. I mean, people will put 20, 30, 40 different vendors tracking code on their booking engine.
Ghostery. Go look at Ghostery.
Yeah, if you want to see anything, I use that as an example in my presentations where I talk to Brandon. It's like, how many people think tracking? Oh, we only have like 3 such and suches, and I get all that information.
Crazy.
49 tracking points on it. And it's where are all these guys going?
I've seen some that have gone over 100 where you got these kind of spammy news, regurgitation, kind of repurposing sites. It's one thing that I think will help that though, and again, which wasn't, they had a couple sessions on it, was blockchain stuff at HITEC, but they didn't I didn't really notice anybody, with their product, in a booth.
It wasn't on the show floor. It's still like theoretical conversation, I think.
Yeah, but I think that's going to be the thing where it's really the rights of who gets access to what and have it locked down on the blockchain where it's not going to be as easy to go spam or spoof or something like that. And I think that's going to wind up being for individuals where it's like, no, this is what I'm eligible for. And I've got it locked in, I got it controlled, and you can't come in and go repurpose it because there's something else, holding the keys.
No, I 100% agree. I think any transaction of anything, whether that's money, data, whatever, at some point, blockchain is going to be underlying that. It's just the way it's going. And I think right now people don't fully understand it and its implications, and we hear it thrown around mainly with Bitcoin. And people kind of dismissive of it at this point.
Scares the hell out of them. Yep.
Yeah, but if you look at all the banks and where a lot of their R&D money is going right now, and security in general, it's blockchain. I think until I don't see anything else out there that is going to compete with it. I think it's going to become.
And I think it's going to be huge in the loyalty area and things like that. With that saying, here's my guy from Europe who finally has a signal. I got to go. Robert K. Cole.
Rock I want to ask you about what next week. You tell me about Rock next week then, all right? Before you go, oh, damn it. Okay, for those who want to know Robert, they can go find him at rockcheetah.com or Robert K. Cole on Twitter.
There you go.
So Stuart, I got you alone. I want to ask you about HITEC. My impression is, because I've had the joy of being able to go to HITEC for literally 14 plus years now. There were times where HITEC was this, to me, golden age. There was so much new innovation stuff. There was so many crazy things. You were just overwhelmed with the just newness of things. And then it turned into sometimes theme based, like, hey, this is the year of
mobile, right?
Mobile or whatever, and you always had the periphery, the 19 and the 2100s or whatever, the far row that was the cheapest row to buy, that were, there you had the people that were all in chipwise, that they spent their last dime to get a booth at HITEC in the hopes that they would find either a patron saint or somebody or reach relevance, and then you never saw them the next week. Now it sounded like, from what you guys were saying, that there's still a few legitimate players, but it's now more equipment based again. It's more like, here we have, this is our shuttle bus over here. This is our door locks over here.
I would say in terms of volume of vendor, it was probably pretty similar. I would say there were 2,100. It got up to the 2,100 row again, right? So I think in terms of scale, it was probably the same. And I'll say this: we already, before the show, we were looking at booth location for next year, and next year's show is already 90% booked, like before the show. So I would imagine if you haven't got a booth next year, you're going to be either right at the back corner or you're not going to have a booth. So I think the demand is there for the vendors. I didn't see a lot of startups this year that I hadn't heard of, which is a little different. I didn't see an overwhelming theme, which was a little different. So it was just kind of all over the place. And the other thing that surprised me was I didn't see the innovation I thought I was going to see. Like the conversations I was having with the vendors could easily have happened 12 months ago. It wasn't. There was a couple of people talking about, we're dabbling in AI and we're dabbling in voice recognition and, stuff like that. But
you think they're just keeping the cards close to the chest because it is one of those, whoever wins it first wins?
Yeah, I don't know. No, I really didn't get that feeling because this industry it's a little loose-lipped. They like to talk about the things that are happening before they've happened. They like to their chest to brag and say, oh, we're doing this, and then you push them. Well, how many installs do you have? Well, it's in beta, and so you get that a lot, and it's surprising. The PMS companies as well was a little surprising. I talked to a handful of those. And everyone's kind of still moving towards cloud-based in some form or fashion. They've all got different opinions, and the ones that weren't had, their arguments they've created for why they're not. But I didn't see a lot of differentiation on the PMS side again. There was no one really standing out particularly. But, it was a good show.
Because that's such a free-for-all market right now. There's 1,000 flavors of PMSs out there.
It is, but they're all vanilla flavored in subtle differences. They've all tried to do, the vertical. They try to provide a complete solution for everything, and they're all trying to go cloud-based, and but no one was really like cracking. No one was solving a new problem that I saw.
Anything that you say that you walked away saying that was at least mostly worth why? I mean, obviously you had your booth and you're one of the legitimizers as to why going to HITEC is valuable, because you're going to come with people like you, and your product. But was there anybody else that you came across that were like, that was good. That was good.
I like the philosophy of Stay Wonderful. I think they deservedly won the innovation award because it was different. The concept, I guess, is not different, but it's actually materialized in the way they're doing it. The one that I don't know that there's any real value in this vendor. I really don't, and I kind of back and forward on the intangible values. If I had deep pockets, I would probably want to buy from or lease from this vendor, and I cannot pronounce the name. I have to look it up and send it to you guys, but. They're the ones doing the automated room service delivery robots.
Oh, the robots. Okay.
And, I saw them last year at the show, just kind of wandering around, but I never stumbled on their booth. So this year I was actually going to do a Facebook Live video with them. But the technology, I think, is ripe with risk. There's no question. There's a lot of, my questioning was going overload, but it was really cool. It was the one thing that I was like geeking out about at the show. So, the concept basically is someone needs a toothbrush and they have a bank of these robots. And they say most of the hotels have one or two. It's not like they have 30 of them sitting there.
Right.
And they put the toothbrush in the top. Well, actually, they punch a code and punch in the room number. The door opens. They put the toothbrush in the top and they press the button. and it literally navigates to the elevator, cools the elevator down, gets in, turns around, faces the front, comes out of the elevator, goes to the front, to the door of that room, and then calls the phone so you know it's there. You pick up the phone, and it's the robot saying, I'm here. You open the door, and that's when it unlocks and lifts up. And then you can, the cool thing which I didn't know they were doing is they're asking a couple of questions when you get the product. So one is, how is your stay? 1 to 5 currently. And if you press 5, it does a little happy dance, which is kind of cute. But it asked a couple of questions, and one of them was, do you want me to stay here for a minute so you can get your camera and take a selfie with me?
Nice.
So it was really cool to watch it in action. You know, I've got to think that in the real world, it's got to be right with maintenance issues and getting stuck in places. And, you know, they did say that they can override it. So they're monitoring at all times, locations. They can detect when it gets stuck, and they can manually control it, which is pretty cool. Security questions come about then too. But I thought it was neat, you know, but when I pushed them on the business model, you know, you lease the robots. I think it's about $2,000 a month to lease it, and that gives you support and maintenance and all that stuff. So it's definitely pricey. So I don't know that you could argue an ROI. They had data there that would argue that it increases ordering from room service, things like that. So they had some math that obviously made it look like a good value proposition. But I think the reason I think I might, if I was a high-end property, gamble on it would be, one, I don't think there was a long-term contract that I could tell. But two, I think you could get some value from the PR side of stuff. Sure. Not just media PR, but also social PR. So people taking the selfies and sharing. It's a novelty and a gimmick that I think adds tangible value. So that was the one that I thought, it's kind of neat. You know, I think a lot of people I talked to were a bit more dismissive about it. They saw it as just a gimmick and not really any tangible value. And it doesn't sound like they've taken off. They've been around 2 or 3 years. They don't have a ton of installs, but it was good.
I think probably you wishing deep down you had an R2D2 unit is probably what it posted.
Well, you know what was cool? And I told them this. When you answer the phone, it like beep, boop, 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 boops when you first answer the phone, and it sounds kind of like R2D2. And that was probably the coolest part of it. And if you skinned it like R2D2 and had, you know, Disney's coming up with these, you know, the Star Wars themed hotel in the new Star Wars land. So if they had these skinned as R2D2, if I was this company, I would be all over Disney.
All over chasing them down. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And their boats too. Why not? Why not have room service from the boats do the same thing?
Exactly. I mean, but that was pretty cool. I will say this. The other thing I noticed, the vendors, especially the newer vendors, because one of the qualifying questions I ask is, or a couple, how long you been in business? And then what's your installation like? Like how many hotels do you have? A lot of the new guys now have stopped answering the number of properties they have and started answering how many units they're in, you know, which is, you know, it's kind of a little misleading. So I saw a lot of signage, which is, you know, we're in 10,000 rooms. It's like, well, that could be one independent chain, you know?
That's you sold one person. Yeah, you sold one person. Yeah.
Right. So we see that a lot.
Any good tchotchkes? Any good? Anybody giving away some good stuff that was like uniquely different?
The one that I saw the most of was fidget spinners. That was the one that a lot of people were into.
I was afraid of that. You know, we didn't even talk on the show about the iPhone turning 10. But I guess we're
that was the article I was most excited about. Maybe we can talk about it next week. But
we'll catch up with it. We'll catch up with it for it. But wow, very cool. Well, we didn't hit some of the topics, but no worries on it. We went well past 2 hours, which is not a surprise. And you were here from the very beginning. It wasn't as if you popped in. You went and ran the whole track and let us run around.
Right. You know, I've got a whole day of talking today. I've got to run and do the podcast in a second, and then I've got to record a webinar for later today too. So,
did you see my little coffee video that I did? Little coffee cup video? Take a peek. I'll send you a direct. I got a new software piece called Videos, Viddoze.
Yeah.
And it's got some pretty neat action, what they call action videos that you can start as a base with. And then, of course, you do your own stuff with it. I put it into another platform called Filmora and then blah, blah, blah. But anyway, it's neat because it does some really neat high tech where I don't have time to do After Effects with Adobe or anything because it takes time to do that stuff, wrap and distort and all this stuff. And this you put what you want logo wise or image wise or text wise, and it'll wrap it and put it into the 3D action video for you, which is pretty cool. So just see what you thought about it. I thought it was kind of cute. I thought, hey, it was kind of professional.
Where you review software, man, because you're always trying new stuff. And
I got a couple more past that. That's what I was going to hit Tim up with. Is I got another one that the Juicer. Have you played with Juicer at all?
I have not.
It's a Twitter growth hack platform, and it's been pretty good. I got to tell you, it's been pretty cool. But anyway, that's another story. Anyway, so for people to find what you do and stuff, how do they can find you?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at Stuart Butler or our company at Fuel Travel. And then you can listen to us every other week on the Fuel Hotel Marketing Podcast, which you can find anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then we just revamped and relaunched an update to our mobile app solution, which is called Guest Express. And you can check that out at Guest Express.
Hope you froze.
That was something I was surprised at HITEC, actually. There weren't as many. Like last year, I felt like there was a ton of competitors in that space. A lot of them have gone, so
really?
There was still a good number of people pushing some form of mobile app, but a lot of them were kind of one-dimensional. Either they opened doors or they did check-in or, they were just informational. So there's very few like Guest Express where it kind of encompasses every piece of utility that you would need in a mobile app. But
I'll have to send you a couple of links of some platforms that reached out to one of my clients about mobile check-in. And have you tear at them a little bit so I have some understanding of them so I can shoot back on some ideas and stuff. So, all right. Well, and for those who want to know the show long-term archives and so forth, since it is show number 99, you can catch all of our old episodes going back almost 2 years at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com /live. And then you also find the podcast link there as well, which is just /podcast. That's gone back almost 5 years now. It wasn't always a weekly podcast. It was bi-weekly and sometimes monthly before the time, which was useless if you think about it, but it's all right. But anyway, thank you, Stuart, so much again for the show. Are you going to be able to make the 100th next week? You're going to be able to hit the 100th?
Yeah, I hope so. I'm around, so unless one of those crazy clients wants to meet, then
it's always come to pop out of the blue. I do probably Jonathan, who was supposed to be our guest host today, as I said earlier at the beginning of the show, towards meniscus, I guess, from a quick email that he sent us. We hope he feels better and so forth. I'm going to pull the Matt Damon on him from the Jimmy Kimmel Show. We'll put him on the credits at the end that we ran out of time for him to join us. Just put it in the rolling credits at the end. But anyway, again, thank you so very much, Stuart, and we look forward to our 100th next week.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks, Lauren.